Hey there, welcome to the 21 Clear podcast. I'm your host, Adam Hatcher, the founder of 21 Clear, a family business consulting firm. And with this and all of our other podcasts, we want to provide resources to you that help you think about your inner family business, the unique way your family works in and owns your company together. This episode is part 2 of my interview with Norm Smallwood. Norm is the co-founder of the RBL Group, or Results-Based Leadership, and he has a concept that I wish I had known earlier in my career at my family's company. A way to answer that question, am I performing well? Am I a high performer? Are my family members high performers compared to what this organization and what our customers need? And the people around us too. And Norm has a model, the 4 stages of leadership, that once I saw it was as simple as it was challenging. In episode 1, we went through stages 1, 2, and 3. If you haven't had a chance to listen to that yet, I encourage you to look in the show notes and you'll see a link for episode 1. Go click there, start with that, and then pick up with this episode. In part 2, Norm and I are going to move to stage 4. In his leadership stages. And then we're going to talk about some of the consequences, both the positive and the difficult or negative consequences for understanding these stages and applying them, or for ignoring them. And it's a fun conversation that draws on Norm's career experience. I mentioned in the first episode, over decades of leadership work. He has worked with publicly and privately held companies. He's worked with companies that were privately held and family controlled, or publicly owned and still controlled by a family. So when Norm talks, he's talking about his experience and his study of companies that understand the full range of that conditional nature of business, that marketplace that doesn't care if you're family owned. It generally just wants to know, what are you doing for your customers and what's happening to your financial performance, your value, and your valuation. That's the perspective he brings. I hope episode 1, when you listened to it, was helpful. And I really hope you enjoy this time we take in episode 2 to flesh out the 4th stage, but then really get into the impact of what it means for you and your company. With that, here is part 2 of the conversation with Norm Smallwood. So what is stage 4? So stage 3 was you're able to contribute through others. That's somebody who's going to be a student of the organization, of their functional area, of functional areas around them. Differentiate that from stage 4.
So the term we used, 1 was dependence, 2 was independence, 3 is influence, 4 is power. So the shift from I need to influence others in the organization, others more senior people than me, to make to bring information together to make important choices, is the shift from 3 to 4. So in some of the other characteristics of stage 4. So the buck stops with me, right? I get to make these decisions. The next one is setting strategic direction, right? I'm not setting it for the team, but the entire organization. Even when you have a small organization, it can be very difficult to say, holistically, here's where we're going. Maybe small now, but it's that vision of the future. In stage 3, you're a mentor. So you're working with somebody like coach or mentor. Mentor meaning that you're helping somebody develop their skills and spending the time to do. In stage 4, you don't see that as much. And the term sponsor becomes more. I'm going to test the stage 3 people to see which of these are able to cut it and to move to the next level. So, and then representing the business or the organization to the outside world would be another element of stage 4. So I've shifted from dependence to independence to influence. Influence meaning the team and others. And then stage 4 is the entire organization, assuming that it's, of some size, and then setting direction, sponsoring versus mentoring. Anyway, so that's the final layer, and again, it's even in a very large organization, there tend not to be like less than 5% would typically be in stage 4. You'd see maybe up to 20% in stage 3, especially if you don't make it. You don't have to have some kind of formal nomination. The more stage 3s you can have, the better. Stage 4, if there's too many of them, they'll probably fight with each other, right? So you don't need them, or they'll go off and start their own thing, right? So
I heard you say stage 4. The thing a stage 4 CEO would say is, my job is to ensure that the company is utterly realistic about the difference between where we are, where we want to go, and the path to get there. And you got 3 or 4 of those together, you're going to have a lot of fights.
Yeah. Well, like I was at SO Resources for several years, early in my career. And they had stage 4 technical people in jobs. They had a chief geologist and a chief geophysicist. And these were folks who had huge influence, and really power, not influence. They had power over the careers of the geologists and geophysicists, of which in exploration and production, there's a lot of those in these big oil companies. And so it's in Livermore, there's 7,000 physicists. And these are the guys that were doing Star Wars in the Reagan administration. But I remember the guy that had the idea for Star Wars was a guy in his 20s. So this would be somebody very early, moved to stage 4, had a vision for Livermore to have it's still important today, the idea of a defensive shield for the military of weapons that could shoot down from space or from wherever, missiles coming in from other places. So it sounds kind of science fiction-y, but it was completely bogus at the time. It wasn't, we couldn't really do it. But Reagan convinced Gorbachev to stand down because, of the belief that Livermore was creating this Star Wars invincible shield around America that was the really cool idea of a young stage 4 guy, PhD physicist. So
somebody listening is going to think, all right, so if stage 2, 3, and 4 can if stage 1, 2, or 3 could accidentally get in a stage 4 position, or maybe we have, like you just described, stage 4s not in a CEO role, but because of our company, stage 4s in different places. The inevitable question someone has right now is, what's the way I can figure out what I am right now? Or if I'm managing my daughter, my nephew, what's a way I can help them see themselves? Because they probably have career aspirations.
The simplest way to do it is that we're self-deceived ourselves about this one. This is the only person who will be self-deceived about what stage you're in is you. And so if you gave somebody the descriptions of the 4 stages and that works with you, it could be a peer, it could be a boss, it could be your spouse, and just say, which of these do you think is more the way I can like to contribute? There's I think a 99% correlation in which those around you would perceive you. And time and again, I've seen people be 3. I remember a program where people could defer working because the company was downsizing, so they would offer them degrees. I remember this person who was this was again in another oil company where they were called a landman. You can see Billy Bob Thornton in Paramount Plus's Landman, find out what they do. But this person was the landman, went off, got an MBA, and came back a couple of years later. And when they were a landman, they were perceived in stage 1. Came back a couple of years later, everybody in the organization saw them still as stage 1, and they were sure that they were stage 4, right? So they wanted to start setting direction and sort of arguing with the other senior leaders. And what you can do to be really helpful with that is when you're coaching somebody like that, it's, the conversation is better run something like, well, you perceive you're in stage 4, but I've talked to others and there's sort of a general agreement that you're in 1. So regardless of where you are, how do we begin to show the path that create the perception that you're not there? And the first one would be, show that you're in 2, and then 3, 4. We'll work you through this, because people can't go from 1 to 4 in terms of the same person that quickly, right? It's a tough road.
It's tough, and that's what I like about the way you've built and taught the stages, is because it gets to that question. In a family company, you want to be seen as a strong performer, not just by your brother, not just by your father, not by your uncle, but you want to be seen that way by customers, by the business, at least in family companies that want to build a great company and stay together as family. And this helps you see, okay, I am stage 2. Now let me show people how to get to 3. So we've focused a lot individually. I want to close this. I want to ask you one more question and pull it out to organizationally. So it's important for any of us to answer stage 1, 2, 3, 4 for our own careers, for the careers of the family members around us. And the cost of that is you can end up in a job that's over your qualifications, or you don't even know the expectation and can be miserable. And I saw a number that you wrote that actually, in your studies, 50% of leaders in most organizations are operating below the stage required for their role. Now, I know that when that's the case, it makes people miserable. But I am curious, when we think of answering that, what's the cost to the organization? If you've got family members who don't know their stage or are operating below the level of their role, and maybe you got leaders that have been with you for 15 years and they were your friends when you started the business and they're operating below it. In companies you've worked with, Norm, what does that cost them if they don't recognize it and address it?
Yeah, usually, you and I have had this conversation before, so it's a little bit of a repeat of that, but our listeners haven't. So
right.
So
you stage rated me. For anyone listening who's like, oh no, I went through this. It's a pretty penetrating look, and it'll wake you up in a hurry.
Well, what happens, and it's in family businesses. It's such an easy mistake to make, and I think it's a mistake, is to assume that the person that we're most concerned about is the leader, right? It's Bob, right? And so Bob's been around. We know Bob's not very good, and Bob has created the conditions where the business isn't profitable. We've got disgruntled employees. So customers that aren't getting the experience that they want, and so it's affecting the business. So, the first place I go is the impact on employees. So it's not about Bob; it's about the 10 people that work for Bob that don't get any development. That if your company does employee engagement surveys and you're in Bob's group and Bob's an expert and Bob's competing with you. It sucks, right? It sucks to work for Bob, because then you're probably looking for another job. If you have external customers, you've got disgruntled employees working for Bob, and now you've got good employees that are skills right here.
Right. You have employees that are working for him that are disgruntled. They're probably customer facing, or some of them, and customers have a sixth sense for what's going on in the business. I mean, what I hear you setting up is, this is the hard, in family companies, you mix the unconditional nature of family with the conditional reality of business. And if you have unhappy employees, you're going to lose value in the company.
You're going to have unhappy customers. Yeah.
And you have unhappy customers, you will absolutely lose value. And so what I like about the stages is it does two things. It answers that question of, what do I need to do? What kind of performer am I? And what do I need to do to be seen as a strong performer? But it also sets the stakes. Family member or not, if I can get people in the right stage and match the right stages to roles, we can build a great company and probably avoid a lot of family fights and family meetings about, well, that person shouldn't be this and that. Like, we can do that and keep the family together.
So, let me just rephrase it slightly differently. So, at least my version of this. You can be successful in any stage except stage one. And so the question is, the individual question, the question for me is, what do I want in my career? And I can't, and we're going to take one off the board. I can't be an employee who can't become an expert in the area that I'm working in, because over time I become unsettled about it. I feel like a failure. Other people look at me and they think, if I'm in a family-owned business and I'm in stage one and I'm leading something, then I'm clearly that was nepotism, right? Because you should have cleared me out of there. So,
well, I have seen where families are uniquely able to do this, and I know this isn't the circumstance you're thinking of. I have seen family companies that in stage one will let people stay there, particularly in the case of special needs. Like sometimes family member or not, stage one, that can be long-term, but absent that, you expect to see people progress in their career.
Yeah, well, and so the issue in stage two, if I want to be an expert my whole career, is just staying up to date technically. If it's three, it's really being great. Like, I've seen people in stage three that are legendary for developing the next generation. Like, if you had your first job opportunity, let's go from Bob to Bill or Sue, and Sue is known for like working with people and setting them up for success later, and she gets to be known as a talent builder and somebody who, this is where talent is built in the organization. If you get a chance to work for Sue, it'll be great for you later in your career because she's just so good at doing that. And then in 4, it's the success of the business, right? It's like Sue is great in 3 because she's the generator and the supplier of talent for the future. And then the stage 4 one is the success of that. If I want to be that guy, it's the person who really grows the business and has, really happy customers and employees who are attracted to come and work with us because of the type of leader and the opportunity, the type of leaders we already have there, and what I can learn by going there. And that's the kind of that's what you want to see versus, this is, just a place where it churns and there's no real future there. And, it's kind of not the place to be. So,
and from an ownership, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Oh, thanks. So from an ownership perspective, one of the values of understanding these stages, if you are considering buying your family company, selling your family company, stepping into a top leadership role in the company, let's say you've hit the right stage, stepping into the top leadership role, bringing in an outside investment, trying to get some sort of liquidity out of the business by bringing in outside investment, be it a private equity stake. It has got to be helpful for understanding stages. If you're about to take the CEO role and you don't know how many stage 1, 2, 3, 4s you have, or if you're going to try to liquidate the business and you've got a bunch of stage 2s and stage 3 and 4 roles, somebody's going to figure that out. Like, you need to know that ahead of time. I assume when you've worked with companies, this has been valuable for them to either understand the value of the organization they're running, or well, what hill am I about to have to climb here? What mom leave me with?
Well, if you think about, when you say, if the company's going to sell or IPO, then, and you think about value, I mean, the value 30 years ago was, what's the EBITDA of this business? And then you've got some kind of a multiplier in your industry for the value of the company. That shifted to a place where, about 20% of value today is the financial value of the company. And it's easy to see this when we think about investment. When you make an investment, like if you're going to IPO or somebody else is going to buy you, or you're going to buy somebody else, it doesn't matter. It's the same thing. What you're valuing is the potential, the future potential of this business. What can we do? So if the company you're looking at has a track record, a financial track record, that's important, but how much does it count for? What you're hoping for is we can trust that the leaders in this company will be able to continue to deliver the right results the right way over time. And the only way you can do that is if you have leaders who can do that. And the stages is a way to, do a proxy of, how strong are the leaders that we have to create, investor, customer, community, employee confidence that because of the track record and because of the perspective that they have about the future. So absolutely. And if you were to want me to quantify it, we actually can quantify it. We've in our work that we published in CFA, Chartered Financial Accountant Magazine, and others, we see quality of leadership being about 25% of the market cap of a publicly traded company, right? So if you have a $1 billion company market valuation, about 250 million of it would be attributable to the quality of leadership, because they're the ones making the choices about the future and what you're going to invest in, what your strategy is, what your brand is, what your pipeline is. Leaders have get to make those choices.
I remember seeing one of the highest multiples and really one of the highest valuations to revenue I had seen in my industry. The industry my family company came out of was a company whose, though they were smaller than the acquirer, their talent was so strong, their top leaders were made the top leaders of the acquiring company. And that to your point, that's circumstantial, but it complements your study that it absolutely shaped the value. And if people are thinking it's not all about the money, that company, the one being acquired, was also known as one of the best places to work in the industry. And so it not only creates value, but for families that care about employee experience and customer experience, having the right leaders, knowing their stages, and in the right roles inevitably creates a company that's just better to work in and to own.
Absolutely. Like, where would you rather be?
Right.
Yeah, I like working for leaders who, create a vision, treat me well, are interested in my future, who care about our customers, versus, talking about, and like in some places, it's all financial or it's all technical, right? So interesting.
And I'll close this with a story here that you've told me. Just seeing the stages is okay. Seeing the stages is great. And then being comfortable where you are and reaching as high as you can reach is fine. And some of my favorite stories are when a family member or a family owner could have probably grabbed the top job, but knew it wasn't for them. Now, I don't know this person, but this is a story I enjoy. So Willie G. Davidson is of the Harley Davidson family, and he was the chief style officer. As I understand, Willie G was responsible for designing a couple of the new Harleys, was a cultural icon and brand ambassador for a company that very much relied on its brand for its value. And then my favorite thing I ever heard about Willie G was that his job was to make sure that each new model, quote, sounded like a Harley. It's just one of the greatest job descriptions I've heard. It reminded me of Julian Van Winkle when he took over as the third generation of Pappy. He was the next generation that was responsible for making sure this tastes like Pappy Van Winkle. But in Willie G and in Willie G's perspective, and Julian Van Winkle ends up selling to Buffalo Trace, to the Sazerac company. So neither of them operated the CEO job of the ultimate company, either Julian or Willie G. Smart business people, but cultural ambassadors with with that idea shaping kind of ability. And to me, those struck me as two guys, as best I've studied them, that were clearly in stage 3 and were deeply comfortable being there and having stage 4s to guide the organization. So to be successful in a family company, you don't have to become the CEO. You don't have to be stage 4. You don't have to become a vice president. It's what can you be, and being really great at it and being willing to go further if you're able.
Yeah, no, I love the story of Willie G. I mean, I've my fond recollection of working with Willie G, and I've got today the ride-free Willie G autograph that I asked him for at the end. But yeah, he was. I was supposed to coach him for an afternoon, and on some 360 feedback that he had, and he said, "Do you mind if we don't do this, because I really hate this kind of stuff?" And I said, it's fine with me. So we went to his house, and he showed me his collection of motorcycles, and it was one of the most memorable days for me. Willie G didn't move an inch on his people leadership skills, and I became a raving fan of Harley Davidson. So I think it was a great trade-off for me.
And if you hear that story and he's the CEO, it would make your hair curl. But what I loved is, for the chief style officer of the company, that is right on. And so for people listening, I want them to hear, it's not that Adam and Norm are saying to be successful, you need to become stage 4. If you want to be the CEO, you need to work to stage 4. But know where you are. You did this with me. Work to be the best you can in that stage, and be willing, if you're capable, of being pushed. And if you're evaluating family members, don't be afraid to give them a stage 1, 2, 3, 4 look, because ultimately it's going to help them and help the organization. Norm, this is such a huge topic, family companies and talent and evaluating, and I am deeply thankful to you for both this model and for taking the time to walk through it with us, because I think for all the complicated leadership ideas and models out there, this is one of the best, simplest, but most challenging ways of looking at it. Thank you so much for walking this through.
Great to talk to you all the time, Adam, and enjoyed it a lot. And this is it's a very helpful perspective to have, and a good framework is really useful.
When Norm and I finished this conversation, I just want you to know I walked away from the microphone with a huge smile on my face. He is so fun to talk to, wise, insightful, honest, kind but challenging. The podcast reminded me of the roughly 2 years we spent doing some deep looking at and restructuring of my family's company. I hope you got to experience just a bit of that in episode 1 and episode 2. 2 things I want to provide to you in the show notes. There is a link to RBL's website. There you can get in touch with Norm or the other consultants that Norm works with. That's how I got introduced to them, and I encourage you to do the same. Even in the first conversation, you will learn things about yourself and the company. And then, since we concluded the podcast and the recording of it, Norm and I talked, and he wanted to make his 4 stages assessment available to family companies regardless of size. So you don't have to be one of these large international publicly traded companies to get access to what I think is a critical aid in helping you and your family company. My email address is in the show notes for this episode. If you send an email to me and ask for that, I'll connect you with the assessment, and Norm and I want to provide that to you just to give you a little bit more of an insight. So the show notes has a link to Norm and also to my email address to ask for the 4 stages. I hope episodes 1 and 2 combined help you get an additional insight into yourself, your company, the people who work there, both your family and non-family members. And I hope you've got a couple of things that you can do to help you on your way to building a great company while you keep your family together with a chaos-proof inter-family business. Until next time, as my grandfather would have said, thank you so very, very much for listening.